All right, today is June 23rd, 2023. My name is Dr. Jason Higgins. Today I'm in Blacksburg, Virginia, and I'm very privileged to welcome Richard Brookshire to campus for Virginia Tech. Richard is the CEO and co-founder of the Black Veterans Project. Thank you for joining me, Richard.
Thanks for having me.
Excellent. What is the Black Veterans Project?
So the Black Veterans Project is a research and storytelling initiative. At the core of what we're trying to accomplish is to further a legislative and litigation pathway for repair for Black veterans, looking at the history of benefit obstruction, kind of going all the way back to World War II, to addressing racial inequities that are persisting to the present day.
Thank you. I'm curious, is your advocacy for Black veterans an extension of your military service? Tell me about that.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess just rewinding a bit to tell folks a little bit about my journey. I served as a combat medic for 7 years. 4 of those were in the active duty Army, where I served in Afghanistan, and then transitioned into the New York State National Guard. After I got out of the military, I had a really difficult transition, one that I didn't anticipate, and really struggled with my mental health for a confluence of reasons. And I didn't get the care that I felt that I deserved from VA. Unfortunately, that led to a feeling of isolation, a year of just unraveling, really. Not an experience that's unique to me. I think a lot of vets go through that. And I found myself on the other side of a suicide attempt. And when I, had to get locked away essentially for about 2 weeks in recovery, I had nothing else to do but read. And there was a book that I'd had on my shelf since I was in graduate school, but I hadn't cracked open. And it was called When Affirmative Action Was White. And it's by Ira Katznelson, an academic out of Columbia. And it looked at the history of social welfare policies immediately preceding World War II, to include the GI Bill and New Deal. And it showed kind of how the white middle class was bolstered and built by access to a host of different federal policies, and largely how Black folk were locked out of those benefits. There were 2 chapters that were explicitly dedicated to the GI Bill. And though I'd heard about benefit obstruction around the GI Bill, it made it really salient. And following that, a lot of my frustration coming out of all the things that were affecting me before I had my suicide attempt were certainly still festering after I got out of the psych ward. And so there was a lot of anger. And I realized that so much of my experience rendered me feeling very powerless. And in engaging with community, I started to understand that I was part of a larger experience that preceded me, that was cross-generational, and that I felt really spiritually called. Even when I was in the psych ward, I remember praying, I think for the first time since I was in Afghanistan, really, seeking a sense of purpose and direction and where to place my talents and my gifts. And this work kind of was birthed from that, an attempt to try to take my power back, but also do something that I felt could be of utility to the community that I was a part of. And at first, when the idea about the project came to me, the name came real natural. Right. But I called it a project because I wanted to make sure that I was doing something substantive. And what that would be at first wasn't very clear. I knew that there was a story to tell there, and I'd always looked at myself like deep down as a storyteller. But the path for this work was really illuminated by following instinct. Sometimes I call it like chasing the rabbit. There was just this deep knowing inside of me that there was something useful that I could do. And I wasn't waiting for guidance about necessarily how to do it. I was just following that calling. And so in building community with some other veterans, we started this work, and it just really evolved over the course of the last 5 years.
That's really powerful. So you took a really difficult transition in your life and tried to transform that into movement. You mentioned about mental health that a lot of veterans face after reintegration or even during the military, but I'm curious, are there unique characteristics to your specific identity that contributed to those mental health problems as well? I mean, obviously you're a Black veteran, you started the Black Veterans Project, but how else do you see your identity as a veteran?
Yeah, I'm a queer veteran, and I think that that's also a really important factor in my journey and in my story. I'm a liberal veteran, which is, sometimes an outlier. And so certainly that played a role in my experience. I come from kind of a first generation immigrant background. My mother immigrated from Haiti. So I've always seen the world through that lens. And I hope that's answering your question, but yeah, certainly there are, multifaceted elements to who I am that informed how I saw my experience in the military, for sure.
And I've heard you describe your nonprofit work as a calling. You told me that last night, right?
Yeah.
Who or what drives that advocacy?
Who or what drives my calling?
Yeah, your calling.
I mean, to be frank, I think this work is deeply spiritual. It has to be to sustain it. Because certainly I never thought of myself as a nonprofit professional. And wanting to manage a nonprofit, it's been hard. Movement work is often unforgiving and extractive and difficult, and takes a matter of consistency. But I feel guided by ancestors. I feel guided by a history that is much bigger than me. I feel privileged to be able to be a voice and to be part of the fabric of a people who have given so much to this country and have just asked for really their basic dignity in return. And so that's what keeps me motivated on the dark days. I have, I'm surrounded by, in my office, by hundreds of books, most of which are about Black veterans in some way. And so when I feel defeated, when I feel, in some respects, maybe a little bit unmotivated, I'm moving through the difficulties of doing this work, I lean on those stories. I pick up one of those books. I remind myself of the privilege that I have to leverage my talents and my gifts and my efforts and my spirit really to make some level of contribution. And I really look at what I do as standing on the shoulders of a lot of other people, and I hope to have others stand on my shoulders too. I really think that that's what success looks like. Still figuring out that part though, but that's a journey. So
well, I think they already are. It takes distance to see it, but I can feel that. Give me a timeline. So when did you have the founding idea to start the Black Veterans Project? And tell me about some challenges along the way to starting it.
Right. So I want to say it was actually the summer right before I had my suicide attempt that I'd had an inclination that I wanted to start some kind of storytelling project around Black vets. Wasn't sure exactly what it would be, how it would take shape. At first I wanted to do a film project of some kind, and we did a fundraiser. I think one of our first initiatives was try to do a fundraiser. I think we raised like a couple $100, so we weren't able to do much with that. And the progression took, I think, about the first 6 months. So kind of from ideation to execution took about 6 months. I'd gone to, a couple weeks after getting out of the psych ward, I went to an event that the Department of Labor had put on for unemployed veterans. I was an unemployed veteran, so I also needed a job. But it struck me when I went there that the vast majority of the folks in the room looked like me and were Black. And they had asked a question about those that had experienced incarceration and or homelessness, and there were a lot of folks in that room that raised their hand, and that also struck me. And so, just coming out of policy school, my first inclination was like, what's the data? Like, I can kind of see it on the ground now. I'm engaging with these, disparate Black veterans groups that are poorly resourced. Really, they don't have a lot of resources, but there's a lot of love and camaraderie in these groups. And they're telling me all these stories, and obviously I'm starting to read books and trying to piece together the historical narrative in some ways that I know that I'm now a part of. And I'm trying to remember exactly what I did. Sorry. So then after the event, I spent a couple of weeks just kind of Googling, wanting to look at where the data was. And I came across a couple of VA reports that, didn't quite spell out the disparities that I felt like I was seeing on the ground. And so, understanding that getting our hands on data would be important as a first step, we ended up just wanting to form ourselves. We ended up getting into an incubator program with something called Bunker Labs. So it was like I think it was like a 4-month incubation period to kind of help us form out kind of what a strategy would be, how we would approach our work. And so that was formative. And then I took my first job in Veterans Affairs. At that point, I had worked loosely on some different electoral campaigns, had worked for the city, had worked in diversity and inclusion. That was like my first 2 years out of the military, kind of a hodgepodge of different jobs. But I took a role leading communications at Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. And that was a really transformative experience. I was there for a year. And that was my first time learning the breadth of how veterans advocacy is done, who the stakeholders are in DC, kind of how policy takes shape, and just who the power brokers are in the veterans ecosystem. And so, and also just how messaging works, political messaging in this space and how to be effective. So taking a lot of that information, I had 1 year left of film school. I had 1 year left of my GI Bill, so I decided to go to an intensive documentary filmmaking program, understanding that storytelling needed to be at the heart of what we were going to do. And at that point, the first year was really just establishing relationships. And you talk about challenges, you go to these poorly resourced Black veterans groups and say you want to do this work. I got laughed out of the room a little bit, you know what I mean? Folks were just like, okay, brother, and a lot of folks didn't necessarily take what we were trying to envision seriously. And certainly white veterans organizations just had no interest. Even, at Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, though they brought me on wanting to make some kind of commitment to racial justice, there was still, at that point, obviously Trump was still in office, so there was a desire to not shake the table, I guess, in some sense. So I felt like I needed to leave that environment and really take a leap of faith. And so it was really during film school, which was in 2020, that the project really started to take shape. I, at random, emailed Yale Law School, who has a really formidable veterans legal clinic, and said, hey, I just started this project. I'm trying to get my hands on data. And would you be able to be helpful? Would you be interested in partnering and taking a leap of faith on me in this work? And they said yes, to my surprise. And that all was culminating around the time that George Floyd was murdered. So it was a time of racial reckoning in our country. And that's when the project really started to have legs, but slowly walk itself forward, was in establishing that relationship with Yale Law School and me taking a leap of faith in diving into wanting to get more skills as a storyteller to contribute toward this work. And having spent that first year building out relationships, at least kind of, making some level of attempt to let folks know that we wanted to disrupt, the veterans ecosystem and really place race and racial inequities as something that needed to be addressed in a more formidable way. That was really the first year and a half. It's just holding on tight to a vision and, trying to move it forward.
Well, you covered a lot of the narrative within that excerpt, and I'm curious about data because I understand that you, with partnering with Yale Legal Services Clinic, right? You filed a Freedom of Information Act. What was the process like getting the VA to provide data on disability benefits for Black veterans? Could you tell me about that?
It was a journey. I mean, I think first it was, as a vet, I don't necessarily know all the complexities of the VA. So really the first year of even standing up those FOIA requests was an attempt to try to understand the build out of the VA as a bureaucracy. And how we would FOIA to be effective at trying to get our hands on useful data, especially because so much of what the VA had said publicly was that they didn't have any data, right? So we knew that we had a challenge ahead of us, and we were able to work with really brilliant law students at the direction of Mike Wishney, who runs the Veterans Legal Clinic at Yale. And it took about a year to put those FOIAs together. We FOIA'd the Veterans Benefits Administration, the Veterans Health Administration. These are all under the umbrella of the VA, and they have different responsibilities under VA in giving access to giving access to different benefits to veterans. And so, yeah, that took a good year to formulate. And when we delivered them, the VA was basically non-responsive, and so we had to take them to court. That took another year. But during the process of all of this, there was a lot of organizing happening. And so, kind of rewinding a little bit back, shortly after the murder of George Floyd, the House Veteran Affairs Committee put together a roundtable of Black veterans groups, and we were fortunate enough to be included in that. In part because I think I understood the internet, and I one of the things that I'll say about kind of because there have been storied Black veterans organizations that have been doing advocacy, like the National Association for Black Veterans, the National Association for Black Military Women, Black Veterans for Social Justice, that have existed for decades. But we're a new generation, right? And we have a different tool at our disposal, which is the internet. And I understood that. And I remember even when I was initially, wanting to think through the project, I'd Googled Black veterans, and there were some disparate articles. There were some kind of academic articles. There wasn't a lot of national reporting on this issue at all at the time. And so I knew that I could be effective there, but then it was like I saw an opportunity to really leverage the internet. And so we were fortunate enough, one of the first media placements that we had was in USA Today, where they kind of did a really nice write-up about the vision for the work that we wanted to do. And so I guess that came up in Google when the House Veteran Affairs Committee was trying to figure out who to bring to the table, because we hadn't really done anything yet, right? But here I found myself invited to be in this roundtable with organizations that had existed for 50 years, some of whom had existed for decades. And in that roundtable, over the course of the last 6 months of 2020, there was a decision to form a working coalition for the first time in history where Black veterans groups were going to try to work in tandem together to centralize their political advocacy. And so because I had this experience leading political comms at IAVA, I volunteered myself to help lead the political comms for this coalition. And so that was kind of happening in the background as I was continuing to build the Black Veterans Project forward.
As a young historian, we probably kind of got started around the same time as I started my Ph.D. program. And one of the things that compelled me to do work on Black Vietnam veterans was their erasure from archives. I went to the Vietnam archive in Texas, and that's one of the largest in the United States on Vietnam veterans in America, and very few, if any, Black veteran in world histories. So, I decided to change that myself, like do that change, right? But I'm curious, what was revealed, I'm curious as a historian, what did you reveal through the FOIA data? What did you get from the VA as far as disability benefits for Black veterans since 2001? Yeah,
so I guess at first we were like, we want to FOIA the VA from its founding, right? Which we actually have since then, but we're still waiting on that data. And so we started with looking at FOIA data from 2001 to 2020. We had to litigate for that. But we were able to show that there were statistically significant and sustained disparities in access to veterans benefits that were uniquely affecting Black vets. And so other minority groups weren't as affected as Black vets. Black women specifically were the most marginalized in these numbers. As much as a 29% disparity in denial rates for PTSD was one of the more major findings that we were able to show. And that was in the most recent years that we were able to pull, right? And so that was revelatory, and we were able to then use that data, and in the work that we were doing, the coalition work that we were doing on the Hill in the 117th Congress, it gave us a lot of power for the first time, because we don't just have anecdotal stories of really unjust happenings, that had been happening for decades and Black vets have been talking about for decades. We had concrete internal VA data that they said for decades that they did not have, proving that there were racial disparities. and we wanted to see action take place. And so one of the first things that we were able to get accomplished through the attainment of that FOIA data was an effort led by Senator Warnock, bill to have a government accountability office study on racial disparities in benefits done that the Biden administration passed in December of 2021. That study actually gets published at the end of July of this year. And so it's only going to look at the last 10 years of data. But another thing that came up in a lot of this work too were whistleblowers, internal VA whistleblowers who said the VA has actually done internal reports over the course of several decades. They knew that there were racial disparities, that they buried those reports, and that they were negligent in their duty to actually address these disparities. There are whistleblowers that have come forward that have said that VA actually has concrete data dating back decades, even further, back to the 1940s, really, that showcase the breadth of racial disparities, and that they're still hiding their hand about it, right? And so we're still working collaboratively with Yale to try to get our hands on that data, and that's not an easy feat. But what that data is actually being used for now, outside of obviously the federal legislative advocacy, has been to undergird a case called Monk v. U.S. And I like to tell the story of Conley Monk because I think it's emblematic and it's really, really important. So Conley Monk is a Vietnam vet. He served 2 tours of duty as a Marine in Vietnam. He got into an altercation shortly after wrapping his 2nd tour with a white superior who called him a racial epithet, and found himself on the other side of a dishonorable discharge. Now, mind you, Conley volunteered to join the Marines at a time when many folks were getting drafted. He also worked at the VA prior to joining, and his father actually worked at the VA as well prior to. His father's also a World War II veteran who did not get access to the GI Bill. So he comes from this legacy of service, but also a legacy of obstruction. It took him over 40 years to gain access to his benefits for the PTSD that he had gotten from Vietnam. During that time, though, he became a leading advocate for veterans in the state of Connecticut, helping veterans get access to their benefits, despite the fact that he didn't have them. And when we talk about benefits, I think, just rewinding as well, we're talking about housing loans, the ability to buy a house without it putting any money down. You're talking about education benefits, of which I understand concretely the importance of, because I wouldn't even be able to be in a position to do this work had I not had access to hundreds of thousands of dollars to attain an education through the post 9/11 GI Bill. You're talking about vocational training. You're talking about disability payments that can add up to thousands and thousands of dollars every single month, and compounded over time can drastically change the trajectory of someone's life and their family's well-being. And so Conley won a landmark suit actually about 2015-ish with Yale, started working with Yale in the early 90s to try to get access to his benefits, was finally able to win a suit in and around 2015. And it was a landmark case because it also gave specifically Marines who had been diagnosed with PTSD or traumatic brain injury the ability to gain access to their benefits for the first time had they experienced a dishonorable discharge. Before then, it was much more difficult. And he was able to get a small settlement that gave him 3 years of back pay. But with the new data that we've gleaned, we're basically making the case that the VA was grossly negligent in its responsibility to address racial disparities, and that Conley is owed for the damages of compensation that he did not get since the early 70s. So he's suing for $1 million in damages. You think about the wealth that could have been accumulated had he gotten access to VA home loans, the ability of him or to either send himself to college or give his children access to collegiate education, let alone all the vocational training and the disability benefits that he did not get access to over decades. And so when you extrapolate that outward, and I want to repeat that he's also the son of someone who did not get access to the GI Bill. You're talking about billions and billions of dollars siphoned out of the Black community. And when we talk about economic inequality, we can't have a real and honest conversation about that without talking about how inaccess and equitable access to veterans' benefits has compounded economic inequality in this country. And so that's really what this project is about.
And I mean, that's the story of America in the 20th century, that World War II, the GI Bill, created the middle class of America, but it excluded African Americans from the burgeoning military social welfare net,
Yeah.
right? And so I was really struck by what you said about PTSD, because we had conversations earlier about how, especially since 2001, PTSD and traumatic brain injury, the signature wounds of war, have been common in discourse about veterans. But I'm curious, do you think that Black men especially are denied that benefit of a doubt when it comes to mental health? Do people look at Black men as something that is other, that doesn't get recognized as having mental health problems or PTSD or traumatic brain injury because they're excluded from mental health care through the VA?
I think there's a multifaceted answer to that question. I think one, there's historical evidence, and I believe there's been medical studies that people believe that Black folk experience pain at different levels than white folk, right? And that's not true. We are fighting the same wars, overcoming the same hurdles, oftentimes greater challenges. I also think that there is a real discount to the weight of discrimination and the scars that leaves on Black folk who've served historically and even today if they come up against it. And so that's discounted, right? And so when somebody puts in a claim and maybe they're talking about their experiences in war, but they also bring race into the equation, it kind of is dismissed, right? And so I can't answer exactly why the racial disparities exist in such a gross way as they do, persisting to exist the way that they do. But I also know that there's a lack of distrust over decades of generations of service. And so, even when it comes to mental health, it's not that Black folk don't suffer the same wounds of war, but they might have different ways of dealing with it. So documentation also becomes an issue, right? When you're in the military, your white counterparts might go seek that mental health care. Whereas if you're trying to go seek it as a black soldier, man or woman, because I don't think it genuinely makes a difference, you could be seen as someone who's trying to get out of their job, who's trying to make an excuse, right? Because you're also seen as somebody who just doesn't, feel pain or experience mental anguish on the same levels as your white counterparts, right? And your experiences are discounted in that way.
It's also that knowledge of how to navigate institutional structures, and
Yeah.
how to seek out help with the VA, and how to file for a petition to upgrade a discharge.
And the lack of cultural competencies that often exist within the VA itself.
So tell me about your work with reparations, specifically for Black veterans.
Yeah, so I spoke briefly about the work with Yale Law School and the litigation. It's landmark legislation because it's using internal VA data to try to make the case for repair for Black vets. Conley is one veteran, but there are others that are joining the suit. And so that's becoming an evolution. And litigation is one potential pathway to try to see if we can hold the VA accountable for this history that we know to be true. Courts are what courts are, so there's no guarantee that will be an effective strategy, but it is one worth pursuing. On the legislative front, there was a bill introduced in the 117th Congress by Congressman Moulton, Congressman Clyburn, and Senator Warnock called the GI Bill Restoration Act. At the most recent estimates is that it would be about a $70 to $80 billion effort. It would extend to descendants of Black World War II veterans, of which diminutive numbers got access to this benefit. You think about in 1948, for example, in the state of Mississippi, over 3,000 home loans were given out to white veterans. Less than 2 went to Black veterans. In the state of northern New Jersey and southern New York, between 1945 and 1956, 67,000 loans were given out. Less than 100 went to Black vets. So when we talk about the diminutive numbers, we're talking about diminutive, very low numbers of Black vets being able to really access VA home loans. Even the education benefits, at that point, there were very low numbers of academic institutions that were white, that admitted Black students, right? You had a host of HBCUs, but they lacked capacity. So you also had a very diminutive number of Black vets able to access in equal measure the education benefits that were afforded under the GI Bill as well. And so the post 9/11 GI Bill seeks to reckon with that history in a more forthright way by allowing descendants to be able to get access to zero VA back home loans and education benefits. That has been an evolution. It got reintroduced in this particular Congress, but it's at this point just a messaging bill. What has evolved out of it, though, is there's also been some conversations about the fact that perhaps if that bill was passed, it wouldn't survive the muster of judicial review. And so thinking about how we might be able to implement some level of redress, there's a bill now called the VA Housing Loan Forever Act that would look to give descendants of any color, but the vast majority would be black, but veterans who did not use the VA home loan between 1945 and I believe it's 1978 would be able to pass down the VA home loan to multiple descendants. That bill is obviously being worked. The kinks are supposed to be worked out in this Congress with the hope that there might be political momentum to pass something like that in the next Congress. But the realities of DC and politics and veterans affairs and trying to get buy-in, it's a difficult process. And obviously, our desire is to want to see the bill in full, the bill that is just, the GI Bill Restoration Act in its entirety pass, right? The evidence is so clear that that is the just thing to do. But I don't think that a lot of folks are necessarily interested in the just conversation. And that's partly because they're not educated, right? They don't understand the history. They don't understand the layers of obstruction that continue and the difference that kind of investment could make. And people can kind of say, oh, well, $70 billion is a lot of money. But let me remind you that we gave more than that to Ukraine in a year. And we're talking about being able to restitute for decades-long project of intentional race-based obstruction to a benefit that black families had earned, right? Because they made the ultimate sacrifice and served this country in the same ways and with the same sacrifices that white veterans had done. So, yeah.
Right on. I can understand how you may be beyond having bad faith conversations about race in America with white people and trying to convince them, right? That makes a lot of sense to me, the impatience with that, because we should be past that by now. But for K through 12 educators who want to enhance their curriculum and bring in a variety or a diversity of veteran experiences in the classroom, what would you like to see the K through 12 curriculum emphasize when it comes to the service of African Americans in U.S. history?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, obviously talking about the accomplishments of black folk is important, and certainly there's a lot of folks that do that and should continue to do that. But I also think you can't have an honest conversation without talking about the GI Bill at the foundational level, without talking about what happened with the GI Bill, how it continues to affect economic inequality today. To me, that is the bare minimum that you can do. If you have it in you and your students are equipped to get into more current conversations about racial inequities and looking at disability benefit, there's so much out there now that you can Google and find so many different articles about, and certainly I would encourage you to do that. But to me, it's understanding how a particular policy instituted by the American government against black veterans, against the interests of black veterans, was foundational to understanding how we look at economic inequality or racial inequality in America. To me, is the first step in having an honest discourse about that history. Yeah.
I would like to give the audience a chance to ask a question, or if you're willing to take them.
Do they have any?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, I have lots of questions, and I know you have a larger story to tell, but well, anyone wants to work up the courage to ask a question.
Don't be shy.
They're camera shy.
I have a question in terms of so you said you have the data. What the data has shown that these black veterans have applied for these things and have been denied. Can I have you emphasize that just a bit more for the person who says, well, maybe the black veteran didn't apply for that. Maybe they didn't show up and file that paperwork. Can you just put a little more stamp on that?
Yeah, so these are veterans that would have generally been eligible for these benefits, because if you have a dishonorable discharge, oftentimes you're discouraged. There are a lot of vets that over the course of many decades continue to apply and were continuing to get denied and have completely disengaged from VA, right? So the data that we have are the folks that are continuing to apply that are putting their best foot forward, that are trying to put forth evidence and are being denied disproportionately. And so, yeah, that's for sure, yeah.
That's a good question. So, Richard, what's next for you?
I'm trying to figure that out. Like the last 5 years have been challenging. This work I've poured my entire soul into. I've seen the fruits of that labor bear a lot of fruit. When I look at the direction of the work moving forward, I think storytelling continues to be the most important thing that we can do. So much of what we've done with such limited resources. We're a very small grassroots organization, so we've done this work because storytelling also takes money, right? It takes camera equipment and microphones and travel and getting crews, and all of that takes a lot of resources. But we're recruiting a new board, moving through a strategic planning process, and really wanting to position our work as a storytelling vehicle to preserve the history that I'm talking about. Because so much, like I said before, of what has been preserved is through the lens of Black excellence, and that has its place, right? Talking about the achievements of the Tuskegee Airmen or the 6th Triple Aid or the Colin Powell or whomever those folks who have overcome adversity in spite of, those stories deserve to be told. But so does the story of the incarcerated veterans. So does the story of the vet that didn't get access to what they deserved, and certainly the history of the GI Bill, especially at a time when our country is so fraught about what histories get to be told to whom. And so especially using the digital humanities as a mechanism to ensure that folks have access to that information, and there are learning tools to engage that history. That's the direction of that work with Black Veterans Project. As personally speaking, my desire is to continue in the vein of storytelling. I'm working on my first film project about a Vietnam veteran named Lucky, who was the first Black female intelligence analyst during the Vietnam War, who helped to predict the Tet Offensive, and her intelligence was ignored in large part because she was a younger Black woman. And the Tet Offensive ended up changing the entire view of the war in America. And so wanting to just continue to do work that uplifts the stories of those that have been marginalized in history is certainly something that I can see for myself. Wanting to expand out of the veteran space, being kind of siloed in the vet space has been its own exhausting, experience. And certainly I want to continue to be an advocate where I can, but I really want to take a lot of that I've learned as a narrative builder, as a communication strategist, and bring that to different facets of the social justice movement. And so that's kind of what I have my eye on. But certainly storytelling, I think that's at the heart and core of who I am. So yeah, I think we might have more question.
I was wondering about the tactics that you're using and why you picked those tactics. So I think I heard litigation. I didn't know if you were doing any grassroots stuff or any direct action, but what tactics do you think will be effective to win this battle, and why?
Yeah, so the grassroots organizing, we had been engaged in that. I won't get into too much detail, but organizing is really hard. So we did that in the 117th Congress, built out a coalition of these 20 different Black veterans groups. Unfortunately, at the end of the Congress, the coalition fractured. Folks kind of decided to go their different ways. Still trying to figure out whether or not it's worth building out a different coalition. Over the course of the last year, though, I've been very intentional about building relationships across the reparations ecosystem, kind of trying to understand best practices. I really think how we're going to be successful is to, one, engage, activate, and educate Black vets so that they can feel empowered to lead this movement as well, and really push forward on the legislative side. And I think there's also a real need to work across the veterans ecosystem. There is a disproportionate power structure in the veterans ecosystem with these kind of larger, very moneyed, very storied veterans organizations like the American Legion and VFW, or Veterans of Foreign Wars, or a host of different veterans organizations that have a lot of political sway. Getting them to care about issues of race getting them to care about wanting to leverage the power that they really have in DC to support repair, I do think is a strategy and tactic worth doing. But we need the right people plugged in, right? And so still figuring that out as we go. And I'm very confident that in this kind of next iteration of our work, especially after we've moved through a real strategic planning process, and hopefully bring in new leadership, because I'm also exhausted. This work is a labor of love, but I am a human being, and we talk about humanizing people. You know, I'm not a superhero, right? Like I'm a veteran in transition, one who bears many scars, and one who has taken their pain and tried to turn it into a certain level of power. But it has been exhausting as well, to feel like you're in an uphill battle to prove the worth of your work. And it's been very humbling to have the work recognized in a lot of ways, to have the ear of the White House and working with congressional leaders and have a seat at the table. But the sustainability of it as an advocate can sometimes feel daunting. And so by way of tactics, I certainly think it's something that we're wanting to think more strategically through, and we're hopefully setting the stage for that in the months ahead. But I'm still taking an inventory of what it's cost me, you know, personally, financially, and otherwise, to just commit myself to this work. And I certainly have no regrets trying to take a lot of the lessons, but also realizing that I need rest and that taking care of myself has to become a priority. And making space and hopefully being able to empower others to move this work forward as well. I think that is my biggest goal.
I have two more questions, but it looks like we have another from the audience.
Hi. You talked a lot about storytelling and a lot about telling these stories. As K through 12 educators, what are some resources that we can use to be able to help teach our students?
Yeah. There's an organization called Kinfolk, which is an incredible resource, and they have these interactive learning tools that you could be on iPads and on phones and on computers. Their next project that they want to work on in 2024 will be about Black veterans and Black veterans history, but they have a host of different educational tools that kind of cross the gamut of Black history, and so that's certainly one resource. I think it's K through 12 educators, like, you know, Google's your friend. There's a lot of amazing articles out there. A lot of, now with the work that we've done in the media, a lot of media to pull from that, you know, you can, you know, engage in a salient way through whether it be like Henry Louis Gates in the presentation that I always give about the work around the GI Bill. Henry Louis Gates has like a magnificent 2-minute video that explains, you know, a really complicated history, but in like 2 minutes in a very salient way. So there's just so much that has kind of materialized over the course of the last few years that it makes me really hopeful about how storytelling will continue to progress. Your local libraries, I imagine, might have resources as well. Different veterans archives. I think the work of Jason is obviously adding to that repository, but pulling from those and humanizing the experience in a way and showing the complexities of the history by leveraging those resources, I think are also really great tools to use. And, you know, if you have ideas, you know, you can email me. I'm all ears. Yeah.
And I can attest that he's very approachable over email, so thank you for being approachable. So high school teachers are trying to carry out oral history projects with veterans in their local communities. I know that you do a lot of work with communities. What advice would you give to them for building healthy community relationships?
Healthy community relationships. Well, I think relationships have to start as authentic, right, and not extractive, not just like you're coming and you're taking out. I think one thing that you can do is figure out how you might be able to volunteer for, you know, events that might be hosted. I think one thing that people don't know is because of, you know, the history of race in this country, there are a lot of historically Black chapters of the American Legion or the VFW where they're just, you know, exclusively Black, if not all Black. chapters, and they might exist in your local city or town, right? And so engaging with them, figuring out how you can support the work that they're doing, and then see how you might be able to help them preserve their history, right? That I think is something that's natural. But I feel like a lot of times people want to do this work and it feels almost exclusively extractive and one-sided. And so leading with authenticity, figuring out how you can help to give back to these communities as much as you're wanting to help them preserve, and how you can do it in partnership, right? Like, where do those stories live, right? I remember I did a historical preservation project with the VFW out of the city of Chicago, and they had photographs dating back 100 years, and they were just being kept in closets in the back, right? So it's like, how do we help you preserve that? Who are the institutional partners that you can partner with in the city? Things like that. I think that those are much more thoughtful ways of engaging with community members. And oftentimes, as you make one good relationship, you'll find that you're able to make more because people can vouch for you, right? So that's another, I think, I'm not necessarily an expert on that, but that's how I lead. And I really just try to be authentic, non-extractive, and generous in giving of my network and resources.
Thank you for that.
Your wonderful work seems to focus on GI reparation in particular. What other kinds of reparation would you be supporting or advocating for others to take up the mantle and pursue?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm really right now considering myself a student of the reparations space because there's so many different perspectives on reparations. I think there is a layered and multifaceted kind of approach to repair. You have federal reparations, like bills like H.R. 40, to even study the history and have our nation kind of lay out a plan of action for it. Certainly that's something that's easy to educate folks on, and folks should at the very least be supportive of wanting to have an honest discourse about that history and support a bill like that. I think there is a burgeoning conversation about how local municipalities and states begin to think about repair. You have states like California that are, have completed reparations task force. The New York State legislature just passed the bill to stand up their own task force. And so you'll see in the years ahead, these task forces at the state level are popping up. You have cities like Evanston in Illinois, who became the first municipality in American history only in the last 2 or 3 years to pass a reparations bill that is actually giving out money, cash, to folks who were affected by being, the racial violence of being pushed out of their homes and redlining and a host of other different issues that affected their ability to live in those communities. In institutions like universities, banks and the like. I think there's so many different layers to it. I don't necessarily expect anybody to have to become an expert on all of it. But if you're working at an institution like a university and you have the ability to engage and sustain pressure on them to really reckon with that history, then let that be your fight, right? Or if you're living in a town that has a history of redlining or racial violence against Black folk, and you're able to push forward and engage with local organizers and see how you can be supportive of trying to figure out if there could be an ordinance or a bill passed on the local level to address that history, be in support of that, right? If there are ways to engage in your state because you can see some level of action taking place at the state level by way of a task force, then I think your responsibility is to try to see how you can be supportive of that. But I think, specifically, as white folk, what you can do is really not only educate yourself, but don't hoard that history. Educate your peers, educate your neighbors, right? And you might find that over time, the more that folks are exposed to that history, the resistance to it will begin to subside, right? Because I think a lot of it is just shocking to folks, or they just want to run from it, or they feel like they feel powerless, and so they just don't want to deal with it at all. But so much of this work, I would hope, is to try to make folk feel like they have power and that they could do something about it. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Richard, I know that your story is not complete, but it sounds like you're getting ready for a new chapter. Is there anything throughout our conversation today that you wanted to talk about that I didn't think to ask, or anything you wanted to go back to?
Not necessarily anything I want to talk about. I'll just say that the biggest thing that I've learned from doing this work is that I did not wait for permission. I did not wait to have all the answers either, but I learned to trust myself and ask the right questions, to move toward folks who had a similar spirit of wanting to do good work, and to continue working in faith, even when sometimes things felt a little bit hopeless. And I think the biggest thing that I've learned as well is that the need and necessity, especially for Black organizers, to care for themselves as they do this work. And so that, I guess, would be the message that I'd like to leave with folks.
Well, it sounds like you've been carrying this movement, on your shoulders and all of the stress that comes with that. And I know all too well how isolating it can be to feel like you have to be the lead to do the work and be the only one doing it, and so I want to thank you for that, and I want to gift you a challenge coin, Crossing Divides, the NEH Summer Institute, as an acknowledgement of that work. But I think we sometimes fall into despair without that community of like-minded people, and knowing that there are other people who will take up that mantle with you and beside you in solidarity with you, learn from you, and stand on your shoulders just like you stand on others. So I want to thank you for your service to your community, to your nation, to the educators in this room, and thank you for sharing your story with me.
Thank you for having me.
All right.